The ragged man had barely stepped through the restaurant doors when several customers turned away in discomfort. A manager quietly motioned toward the exit, and one employee whispered that someone should call security before he disturbed the lunch crowd. But just as the tired stranger prepared to leave with his head lowered, a young waitress gently pulled out an empty chair by the window, smiled with sincere kindness, and insisted that everyone deserved a place to sit. Less than an hour later, every fork in the restaurant fell silent when luxury cars filled the parking lot and a board of directors rushed inside, revealing that the lonely homeless-looking man was not a stranger at all, but the anonymous founder and CEO of the entire restaurant chain. Yet the greatest surprise was not his identity. It was the heartbreaking reason he had chosen to walk into his own restaurant looking like a man who had lost everything. Before we discover why one small act of compassion changed countless lives, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue sharing stories that remind us that kindness often appears when we least expect it. Alastair Rowan had spent more than 30 years building Rowan Table, a family restaurant company known across the country for fresh meals, warm hospitality, and the promise that every guest would be welcomed like family. The advertisements proudly declared that people came for the food but returned because they felt valued. Customers loved the restaurants, shareholders admired the steady growth, and employees respected the company for offering scholarships and fair wages. To the outside world, Alastair had everything a person could desire. He owned beautiful homes, received prestigious business awards, and appeared on magazine covers celebrating his success. Yet behind every polished photograph lived a quiet loneliness that no achievement had ever managed to erase. Years earlier, Alastair had lost his wife to a sudden illness. Their only daughter had moved overseas to pursue humanitarian work, and although they loved one another deeply, busy schedules and enormous distances made their visits painfully rare. Board meetings filled his calendar, but empty afternoons filled his heart. He began wondering whether the company still reflected the values he and his late wife had dreamed about while serving customers inside their very first tiny restaurant decades earlier. Reports praised rising profits and expanding locations, but spreadsheets never measured compassion. Numbers could not reveal whether every guest still felt seen, especially those who looked as though life had treated them harshly. Instead of sending auditors or announcing inspections, Alastair decided to discover the truth for himself. One bright spring morning, he dressed in worn clothing purchased years earlier for charity construction projects. He left behind his tailored suits, expensive shoes, and elegant watch. He allowed his neatly trimmed beard to grow for several weeks and carried an old backpack with frayed straps. Looking at his reflection, he saw not a billionaire executive but a weary man who appeared to have spent many difficult nights without comfort. He drove alone to one of the busiest Rowan Table restaurants located beside a lively shopping district where families enjoyed the warm afternoon sunshine. Children laughed while chasing pigeons across the nearby plaza, office workers hurried toward lunch meetings, and elderly couples strolled peacefully beneath flowering trees. The restaurant bustled with cheerful conversation, the comforting aroma of fresh bread, roasted vegetables, and homemade soup drifting through open doors. As Alastair entered, several conversations quietly stopped. A hostess glanced nervously toward the manager. Two customers frowned before returning to their meals. One employee discreetly pointed toward the entrance, clearly uncertain whether the man belonged inside. Alastair noticed every expression. He had expected hesitation. He had not expected the sadness that accompanied realizing how quickly appearances shaped assumptions. The manager approached politely but cautiously, explaining that every table had already been reserved for the busy lunch period. Although several empty tables remained visible throughout the dining room, he suggested trying another location. Alastair nodded with understanding. He thanked the manager softly and turned toward the door without creating discomfort for anyone. Before he reached the entrance, a gentle voice stopped him. A young waitress named Cora Winslow had witnessed the entire exchange while carrying a tray of freshly prepared meals. She looked no older than 23, wore a neatly pressed uniform, and carried herself with quiet confidence despite the rush surrounding her. Growing up with a single father who had experienced unemployment after a factory closure, Cora understood how quickly people judged those who appeared to struggle. Her family had survived difficult years because strangers occasionally chose compassion over assumptions. Without seeking permission or attention, she quickly cleaned a small table beside a bright window where sunlight streamed across polished wooden floors. She invited the weary stranger to sit. She explained that one seat could always be found for someone needing a warm meal. The manager looked uncertain but allowed it after seeing that lunch service remained manageable. Alistair thanked Cora with sincere gratitude. She handed him a menu exactly as she would any other guest. She never rushed him. She never spoke with pity. She simply treated him with ordinary dignity. As she returned with a glass of water, she noticed Alistair studying the menu carefully before quietly closing it. He admitted that he probably could not afford much. Instead of appearing uncomfortable, Cora smiled warmly and pointed out the restaurant's daily special, explaining it offered generous portions at the lowest price available. She also mentioned complimentary bread and soup came with every lunch order. Her kindness carried no trace of embarrassment. It felt natural. While preparing his meal, Cora noticed another server joking that some customers only occupied tables without spending enough to justify the space. She politely reminded her coworker that every paying guest deserved respect regardless of how much they ordered. The comment ended there. Alistair quietly listened. When the meal arrived, Cora carefully ensured the soup remained hot and the bread fresh from the oven. She asked whether he needed anything else before hurrying to assist another family. Several tables away, a little boy accidentally dropped his fork beneath Alistair's chair. The older man retrieved it, handed it back with a gentle smile, and wished the child an enjoyable lunch. The grateful parents thanked him warmly, while Cora noticed how naturally kindness flowed from someone others had judged within seconds of his arrival. Throughout the meal, Alistair observed everything. He saw cooks working tirelessly despite intense pressure. He watched dishwashers laughing together while helping one another finish difficult tasks. He noticed one impatient supervisor criticizing a busser harshly for moving too slowly. He also watched Cora quietly encourage that same young busser moments later, restoring confidence without seeking recognition. When Alistair finished eating, he counted the cash inside his old wallet. It was intentionally just enough to cover the meal. No tip remained. He quietly apologized to Cora for not being able to leave anything extra. She simply thanked him for visiting and wished him a peaceful afternoon. Not once did disappointment cross her face. As Alistair prepared to leave, an elderly customer using a walking cane struggled near the entrance after becoming slightly unsteady. Cora immediately hurried over, steadied the woman gently, carried her takeaway bag, and walked beside her until she reached the waiting car safely. Again, compassion appeared effortless. Just as Alistair stepped outside, a convoy of executive vehicles entered the parking lot. Regional directors, board members, and senior corporate leaders climbed out quickly. Employees inside looked through the windows, confused by the unexpected arrival. The executives walked directly toward the elderly-looking stranger standing quietly beside the entrance. One after another, they greeted him respectfully as Mr. Rowan. Complete silence spread through the restaurant. Customers stopped eating. Servers froze in place. The manager's face lost all color. Within moments, everyone realized the man they had almost turned away owned every restaurant carrying the Rowan table name. Alistair requested that everyone gather inside for a brief conversation. His voice remained calm. There was no anger. No public humiliation. Only quiet disappointment mixed with hope. He explained that he had not visited in disguise to embarrass anyone. He came because he feared the company had begun measuring success only through revenue, table turnover, and expansion plans while forgetting the simple promise that had inspired the first restaurant. Every guest deserved dignity before judgment. He described arriving dressed like someone experiencing hardship. He spoke about the uncomfortable glances. He acknowledged the manager's difficult responsibility to maintain order while gently pointing out that empty tables had existed. Then he turned toward Cora. He thanked her for saving him a seat. Not because he happened to own the company. Because she believed every human being deserved kindness before knowing their story. Tears filled Cora's eyes as she admitted she had only done what felt right. She explained that difficult years in her own childhood taught her never to assume someone lacked value simply because they lacked money. Alistair smiled gently. He shared something few people knew. When he and his late wife opened their first tiny restaurant decades earlier, they had often depended on strangers who offered patience, encouragement, and second chances during seasons when they barely earned enough to survive. Without those acts of compassion, Rowan Table would never have existed. The room remained completely silent. Even customers listening nearby wiped away tears. After the gathering, Alistair invited the manager into a private office. Expecting termination, the manager confessed that pressure to increase efficiency had gradually made him focus more on numbers than people. Staffing shortages, rising costs, and constant performance targets had slowly changed the way he treated guests. Alistair listened carefully. He explained that pressure could explain poor decisions but should never erase empathy. Rather than dismissing him, Alistair enrolled every manager throughout the company in new leadership training centered on emotional intelligence, hospitality, and compassionate service. Store evaluations would no longer measure only financial performance. They would also celebrate teamwork, kindness, customer care, and the ability to preserve human dignity during busy days. Cora unexpectedly received an invitation to join the company's hospitality leadership program. She hesitated, believing others possessed greater experience. Alistair told her that technical skills could be learned. A compassionate heart had to be protected and encouraged. Months later, Cora became an assistant manager while continuing to serve guests personally whenever possible. She trained new employees to see every customer as someone's parent, child, sibling, or friend rather than merely another transaction. Under her guidance, the restaurant developed a reputation for extraordinary warmth that attracted not only loyal diners but also employees proud to work there. The former manager also transformed. Supported instead of discarded, he apologized sincerely to his staff and worked hard to rebuild trust. His leadership gradually softened as he learned that genuine respect inspired stronger teams than fear ever could. Alistair continued visiting restaurants anonymously from time to time. Sometimes he dressed normally. Sometimes he blended quietly into ordinary crowds. What mattered most was no longer whether people recognized him. It was whether they recognized the humanity in everyone else. One sunny afternoon nearly a year later, Alistair returned to the same restaurant wearing simple everyday clothes. He sat quietly near the same window where Cora had once offered him a seat. Across the dining room, he watched her welcome an exhausted construction worker, an elderly widow dining alone, a young family celebrating a birthday, and a teenager nervously attending a first job interview over lunch. Every person received the same warm smile, the same patience, and the same respect. No one knew the founder was watching. No performance had been staged. Kindness had simply become part of the restaurant's identity. Alistair looked toward the bright afternoon sunlight pouring through the windows and quietly realized that the loneliness he had carried for so many years had begun to fade. Not because his life had become easier, but because he had rediscovered the dream he and his wife once shared. They had never hoped to build the largest restaurant company. They had hoped to build places where hungry hearts felt just as welcome as hungry stomachs. Before this story comes to an end, please leave a meaningful comment sharing whether someone has ever shown you unexpected kindness during a difficult season of your life. Your story might become the encouragement another person desperately needs today. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. May we all remember that the most valuable seat in any restaurant is not the one with the finest view, but the one offered with genuine compassion to someone who thought the world had forgotten them.